welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I'm Sanjay Acharya with Hilabs. We're partnering with CDO Magazine, MIT, and CDO IQ and the International Society of Chief Data Officers for a series of interviews. Today, I have the great pleasure of talking with Luis Velandia, Chief Data Officer at Best Doctors Insurance. Hi, Luis, how are you?
Hi, how are you? Thank you very much.
The first question is, in your career, how have you leveraged enterprise data or analytics to create, business value?
Okay, well, based on my experience, I think I would say well-defined and implemented data analytics strategy at scale aligned to the corporate strategy is critical to create value across the organizations. That's going to be my key message. And as I mentioned before, if you've had a good data analytics strategy that includes things like, people and culture, which is more related to data culture and data literacy, clear processes and an operating model, the right technology, the data management required to successfully execute on the strategy to deliver actionable insights, that's super critical to create business value. I think the right combination of these domains can make a huge difference in the way organizations can create business value. However, I would say that as part of this journey, and assuming that we have the data, one of the things I've seen that can make difficult the process of getting value from the data is, one, is what the initial understanding and formulation of the business questions the organizations are trying to answer or the business problems they are trying to solve for. And second is the quantification of the impact in terms of cost savings, productivity or revenue growth. For me, this is critical if we really want to prioritize a big list of potential analytic use cases. Additionally, I would say this will have a clear dependency on the analytical solution. It could be a dashboard, could be a deep dive analysis, could be a machine learning or a deep learning model that will ultimately create tangible, actionable insights. That's my message. We need to create tangible, actionable insights for the stakeholders. And the stakeholders, they need to use those insights, make decisions, because that's where value is going to be materialized. That's how they're going to improve the decision-making process. And we need to align these elements. And what I've seen is, and I've participated in different transformational initiatives. The message I want to get across here is, at the end, organizations should aim for a robust analytics and data architecture that translate the business needs into data and system requirements with a clear view on how the data flows through the organization. In other words, what I'm trying to say is, what the common goal is to enable organizations to create smart data and business-led decisions. That's super important, Sanjay, at scale, aligned to its strategic corporate goals.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for providing that insight. I guess along the same lines, whenever you've had some of these initiatives come along, right? I think one of the challenges that chief data officers and other folks in the technical arena face is how do you really explain the promise, right, of these different analytics techniques or these different models? How do you explain the promise of those to your business team and kind of get them on board with supporting you in the way necessary to drive that value?
Yeah, I know. I believe that the abundance of data and the rise of new quantitative and advanced analytics have created the promising area, this data analytics. And this is a combination of a culture of data and value-driven decision making and techniques to include domain knowledge, allows organizations to exploit big data analytics and in their evaluation and decision processes. However, yes, I've seen that some organizations do not clearly understand the value of using analytics, and there should be strategies and mechanisms to educate them and make them part of this exciting journey. I'm very passionate. I love this. So what I've done in the past, which has actually works really good, includes two different approaches depending on the audience. And one is your team members, and two is related to the stakeholders, or I call them partners. So for my team members, I I always make sure they understand the importance of data analytics as the strategic enabler, not the support function, the strategic enabler for the organization to improve its decision-making process. I normally explain the analytics value chain, the importance of formulating business questions. This is a critical one as well. The type of analytics we can do from a dashboard deep dive for machine learning, deep learning, how to run the projects using Agile. And maybe there's a topic for different interview, but Agile methodology is something super important that we are currently applying, and I've been applying this for years. How we can create, of course, meaningful insights that offer some tangible promise of value. And this is super important, Sanjay. As some data analysts or data scientists need to improve on this, and we're helping with that. That's part of the education. That's part of how do we evolve. It's the importance of communicating effectively those insights using the data stories, and how we need to help our stakeholders to create impact by making decisions and taking action. This has to be a team effort, and I have no doubt about it. I mean, I have sat down with people, the stakeholders, with my teams, explaining insights. Initially, at some point, you could be very technical, and some stakeholders, they don't understand that, and maybe they don't care. That's given for them. Is how we can actually provide them with the insight they can understand, and how we can go through them to, for example, focus on a pilot, and then track the pilot and make sure that it's actually creating value. Now, the second part of this is the audiences that I want to talk about is my stakeholders. Obviously, what I do with them is I normally start bringing people together from the functions to explain, for example, what is data analytics, what is the strategy around it, what is important, and what they can get for that strategy. How that can actually improve their decisions, something they didn't have before, something that will accelerate the way they can make decisions, what I call speed to insight. I like starting with how critical it is for them to formulate the business questions or business problems, using kind of things like, from problem solving, and there are different approaches, but this one actually, has worked really good for me, the situation complication question approach, for example, as a starting point. I also run sessions to make sure they understand this, but more important is to make sure they clearly understand that the data analytics is a strategic enabler. As I said before, we are not a support function. I also explain kind of the partnership we can create to operate better and be successful as a result, like showing tangible analytics applications to get them on board, running trainings about bridging, that's a key one, bridging the gap between technical people and non-technical people. That's something is important, especially in the data science space. In other words, they clearly need to understand what data analytics can do for them with the new skills and technologies they didn't have before in their functions. And we, in the data analytics team, we can accelerate that process. So that's kind of the way I normally explain to these audiences, and I think it's worked really good.
Okay, thank you. And the other question we had was, and this is a challenging one, I think, across, again, the data landscape, right? So success, they always say, has like 1,000 fathers, failure has like none, right? So in your case, right, how do you show sort of a clear path or causation between, whatever your analytics are discovering, and connecting that to the business value actually realized, right? Because there's always like a lot of noise. So how have you kind of navigated that, or kind of showcased that the analytics that your team has provided have really kind of moved the needle on that business metric?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good question, and I have great examples, but I can tell the story of one that was developed in conjunction with the business GM of a bank using the agile methodology. And the approach I used was based on three elements. So there was a combined effort. That's a key message, Sanjay. Here is a combined effort between the SMEs, data engineers, data scientists, data analysts. This is, I can guarantee it's going to be successful if we can kind of tackle this way the different problems we have in different organizations. Obviously, the approach I used had three elements. One is the business questions. What questions are most critical for your business to answer? Obviously, those are the type of questions that require, those questions that are urgent, that have a large impact on the business. but the business doesn't have the capability to answer. So these questions sometimes can frustrate leaders in the organization, and they are often seen as traditionally unknowable, and are often the answers are more like a gut feeling. So once I remember the question we ended up, having, because we run like a different workshop with them, and it was more related to, how the business can deliver an increase in EBIT, for example, through pricing in a small and medium enterprise business segment. That was the question. And then we started saying, okay, how do we do this? The second part of that was a clear structure, analytical excellence, or and test and learn. And in the 3-week process, you can develop 3 to 6, which is more a sprint approach. You can develop and test the answers to the questions. So with that test and learn approach, you can structure and go through that process. And at the end, you can lead analytical and reporting techniques to test these questions. Remember that not necessarily, the sprints will help us to get immediately to the question. Maybe we can fail, and this should be used to refine further questions. So in this case, in this specific example, there were some hypotheses that were developed around individual customer profitability. 3 different systems were analyzed to build up an end-to-end view of the customer profitability. And obviously things like, it included like master data, customer transactional data, and cost driver data. And finally, it's about delivering actions and providing benefits. That's the third part of this process. The question is how the sprint build a bridge to action. And the sprint is going to help you with that process. But as long as we can develop that actions that the business can implement, that's going to be super important. It's, for example, an assessment of a product set needs to link to specific actions that can be implemented and tracked. For instance, in expanding the product, bundles sold to mid-sized customers. And obviously the key message here is, how do we track benefits? We need to create mechanisms, could be a dashboard, could be a Tableau report, to track the benefits, to understand whether what we have implemented in a pilot, for example, or a POC is working or not. And then you can pivot, perish, or pursue. And then at the end, you can see that there might be an enrichment of the data analytics capability developed in the organization. In this case, specifically, we were able to provide 3 outputs to the stakeholders saying, this is a decision tree to reduce unprofitable customers, a list of clients to move from delivery to self-service, and a campaign to target rebates on high-value customers only. And all of these were handed over to the stakeholders to be implemented. The benefits, after 1 year, I remember it was like a 3% uplift in the EBIT, and the second year was 4%. It was very rewarding to see these outputs. And I still have my conversation with the business GM, and he's very happy that we were able to help him with that problem in the past.
Great, thanks for sharing that fantastic example. I think that concludes our interview. So I want to thank you again, Luis, for joining me today. And for the audience out there, please visit cdomagazine.tech for additional interviews just like this.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Sanjay, for having me.